Oil prices are at their highest since 2022. Petrol in the United States has jumped nearly 30 cents in a single week to $4.30 a gallon, and U.S. Central Command has reportedly prepared plans for a wave of short and powerful strikes on Iran. The Strait of Hormuz, the artery through which a fifth of the world's oil flows, is effectively closed. Iran is calling the blockade intolerable. And some Republicans are now breaking ranks to demand accountability in what they're calling an unpopular conflict. Joining me now are Marcus Webb, our defense and security analyst, and Sophia Reeves, our economics and markets editor. Marcus, let me start with you. Is Trump's Iran blockade a masterstroke of strategic pressure, or is this administration gambling with the entire global economy?
Thanks, Emma. Look, let's be clear about what's actually happening here. The United States has finally applied real structural pressure to a regime that has been at war with America since 1979. Iran funds Hezbollah. Iran arms Hamas. Iran's proxies have killed American soldiers across the region for decades. And every previous administration, Obama with his nuclear deal, his pallet of cash in the dead of night, Bush with his endless diplomatic overtures, every one of them treated the Islamic Republic as a negotiating partner rather than a state sponsor of terror. What Trump has done is what Douglas Murray has been arguing for years: strip away the diplomatic theater and apply consequences that actually hurt. The blockade is working. Trump himself says so. And the oil markets, which don't lie, which don't have a political agenda, the oil markets are confirming it. The price signal is the pressure signal. Iran is being squeezed. Now, some Republicans in Congress want to break ranks and demand accountability. I'd like them to tell me what their alternative is. More JCPOA negotiations? More patient diplomacy while Tehran spins centrifuges? The uncomfortable truth is that if you want Iran to change its behavior, you have to make the cost of not changing unbearable.
But Marcus, here's the hard question. At $4.30 a gallon and climbing, aren't American families bearing the cost of this strategy? And if the blockade drags on for months, does Trump own every cent of that pain at the pump? Sophia, what's your take on this?
Well, look, Marcus isn't wrong about the strategic logic, but here's what I think he's glossing over. 30 cents a gallon in a single week is not a rounding error. That is a shock. And when you translate that across the entire U.S. logistics and transport network, every good that moves by road gets more expensive. That's groceries. That's medicine. That's construction materials. We're talking about a de facto inflationary event hitting an economy that's only just stabilized from the last inflationary cycle. Now, I'm a free market advocate. I believe in economic pressure as a tool of statecraft. But the data has to be front and center here. The Strait of Hormuz handles roughly 20% of global oil trade. Even a partial sustained disruption has multiplier effects that reach into every economy on the planet, including economies that are U.S. allies. The NGOs calling for a humanitarian corridor aren't wrong either. Food, fuel, and medicine aren't reaching people who need them. That's a real cost that eventually becomes a political and strategic liability.
I hear what Sophia is saying, but with respect, that misses the point entirely. Every serious application of military and economic pressure has costs. Every single one. Did the sanctions that helped bring down the Soviet Union come without economic pain? Of course not. Did the Gulf War push oil prices up? Absolutely. The question isn't whether there's a cost. The question is whether the strategic objective justifies it. And the strategic objective here, defanging a nuclear ambitious theocracy that has spent 40 years exporting terrorism, is about as serious as it gets. Sophia's citing $4.30 a gallon like that's the end of the argument. But what's the cost of Iran getting a nuclear weapon? What's the cost of Tehran being able to hold the entire Gulf region hostage with a bomb instead of just rhetoric? Let me tell you what's really going on. The people demanding Trump back down are the same people who gave us decades of failed policy that made this confrontation inevitable.
Here's what I want to know, and I want both of you to be honest with me. U.S. Central Command has prepared plans for short and powerful strikes on Iran. Republicans are already breaking ranks. Iran says the blockade is intolerable. Is this heading toward a full kinetic exchange, or is there still an off-ramp? Sophia, where do you see this playing out?
The way I see this playing out, there are really two plausible near-term trajectories. The first, and I think this is the optimistic scenario, is that the economic strangulation becomes severe enough that Iran's leadership makes a calculation that survival requires genuine concessions, not cosmetic adjustments, but real, verifiable commitments. The problem is that requires the Islamic Republic's ruling clerics to prioritize national survival over ideology, and history doesn't give us much confidence there. The second trajectory, and frankly I think this is the more likely one if current trends continue, is a proxy escalation. Iran starts hitting U.S. assets in the Gulf, Saudi infrastructure, Israeli targets, enough to raise the cost of the blockade without triggering all-out war. And that middle space, that gray zone of escalation, is where miscalculations happen.
Here's what concerns me most, and I think this is the scenario nobody in Washington wants to say out loud. Naval confrontations have a history of escalating beyond anyone's intentions. The Gulf of Tonkin, the Falklands. History tells us that when you put warships in close proximity to a regime that's been cornered and is calling the situation intolerable, the margin for error shrinks dramatically. CENTCOM's short and powerful strikes plan exists for a reason, because someone in uniform has already wargamed the scenario where Iran miscalculates and we have to respond kinetically. The real risk here isn't that Trump escalates deliberately. The real risk is that Iran does something desperate, we respond, and suddenly we're in a conflict that neither side fully intended. 6 months from now, the question won't be whether we can win that fight. We can. The question will be whether the political will to finish it still exists when Republicans on Capitol Hill have already started looking for the exit.
Sobering analysis from both of you, and one thing's for certain. Someone in Tehran tonight is staring at the oil price ticker and wondering exactly how much longer they can hold out before the next move is forced upon them.